Today I'm talking about the Hoka Clifton 7 after 100 miles. 11.18 miles, 9 minutes, 45 seconds per mile, 138 beats per minute today. Getting in a run on a chilly morning here in New Vienna, Iowa, but having an absolutely fun time with the Hoka Clifton 7, getting it to the 100-mile mark. Now, before I give you my thoughts on how the shoes held up over the last 100 miles, I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a pair of shoes that I purchased with my own money. No one sent it to me, and no one's reimbursing me for any purchase price. And no one's going to get a chance to preview my thoughts or footage before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with the disclosures out of the way, let's talk about the Hoka Clifton 7 after 100 miles. Now, the Hoka Clifton 7 is a cushioned daily trainer, one of the flagship shoes from the Hoka One brand. And this year, they didn't do too much to change it from the Hoka Clifton 6. And that is an absolutely fantastic thing because I really enjoyed last year's Clifton 6. Now, when I first put on the Hoka Clifton 7, I did think that it was a little bit maybe too mushy. Maybe they had made it a little bit softer of a shoe and kind of took off some of the agility and some of the nimbleness of this shoe. But over the last 100 miles, some of that initial concern has gone away. But looking at the upper over the last 100 miles, it's doing really fantastic. Nothing is wearing through. It's still holding up really well. It looks good. Still pretty breathable of a material. And on this particular day where the temperatures dropped dramatically overnight, everything was very, very wet just from like dew points. And so once I got into some grassy territory, these shoes definitely picked up a lot of water and they kind of held on to it a little bit longer than I'd like. Granted, this is a road shoe and not necessarily a trail shoe, but because of the outsole pattern that's on here, I did feel like it was pretty comfortable out on the grassy, hilly terrain, even though it was a little bit wet. I enjoyed the amount of padding that's on here. Very, very light amount of padding that's on the tongue as well. It also just stayed in place. The fit is really dialed in well on this shoe, although I will say that overall it just feels like it's a shoe that's too big for me. It just feels like there's a lot of midsole. It feels like there's a lot of outsole. It feels like there's a lot of upper. There's a lot of kind of everything here. There's a lot of shoe here, but it's working and it's all very comfortable. As far as the outsole goes, the rubber is holding up very well, as is the midsole foam. All the white stuff that you're seeing here that you're running directly on is also holding up really well. The rubber on the forefoot is actually holding up much better than I was expecting. Nothing is unduly worn. It doesn't look like it's brand new, but it certainly doesn't look like a 100-mile shoe in the forefoot. Then once we get to from like the midfoot and back though, that is where I am seeing a lot of wear. And so despite my best efforts, it is quite apparent that I am hitting this shoe right on this rear right side or outer portion of the shoe. And this is normally where I get the most wear on my right side. I'm also seeing something similar on the left side, but it's much more prominent on this right side. It's even shooting up a little bit onto some of this midsole foam here. So it's a little bit scratched and a little bit scuffed up. I spent most of my time though running on dirt roads and rocks and gravel. So the fact that it looks like this is actually quite a success, I think, for a shoe where you're running directly on the midsole foam and a shoe where you have only very strategic placements of rubber. So I feel like they're doing a great job balancing performance and also durability with the way that they very judiciously applied the rubber here. It's a similar design pattern as last year, and I think it's doing just as well as it did last year. So really fantastic in terms of the outsole wear. And the midsole is also holding up fantastic. I wouldn't say it's holding up quite as well as the outsole is, but it's not doing poorly either. I think the best way to put it is that it feels like a shoe that has about 100 miles in it. So not exactly a new shoe, but also a shoe that still has plenty of life left into it. I mentioned that initially it felt like it was a super soft, maybe a too soft of a shoe for a daily trainer, and how that went away. I think the main thing that I'm feeling here is kind of two things are happening. Hoka shoes have a lot of stack height. This one has 27 millimeters of EVA foam in the midfoot and a 5 millimeter drop, giving you 32 millimeters of EVA in the heel as well. So there's a lot of EVA foam in here, and EVA kind of changes over time. It compresses a little bit, and so the ride and what you're feeling is going to change slightly over time. And so what I think I'm feeling is a little bit of that EVA compressing, but not in a bad way. I think though the main difference might be in the insole itself. There's an ortho light insole in here, and I think that's the thing that gave me that kind of like, this might be too soft of a shoe to be enjoyable for running. I think that kind of mellowed out a little bit, and so now I feel like I'm feeling the EVA midsole that's in here, and it's really great. It reminds me very much of the Clifton 6 that I enjoyed very much last year. So I feel like now that I'm comparing apples to apples, the Clifton 6 at 100 miles and the Clifton 7 at 100 miles, I feel like both of these shoes are holding up really well, but also really enjoyable shoes to run in. I've been able to go on short runs and longer runs. I think maybe 11, maybe 13 miles is the longest that I went in this shoe, and it held up fantastically well in all those distances. And even instances where I'm moving a little bit quicker, doing some of my hill surges in the area, the shoe can definitely rise to the challenge. It's not a shoe that I'd want to take to a track workout, for example. There's just a lot of shoe here. It comes in at 9.1 ounces, which makes it a little bit of a heavier shoe. And it's got all that stack height. So again, not something that I want for a super fast day, but for something where maybe you're going to go for a long run with some strides at the end, I wouldn't worry about the strides at all. The Clifton 7 is going to do fine. If you got hill surges, you're probably going to be fine as well. And the shoe looks like it's ready for a lot more use as well. So even though it's got 100 miles into it, I would expect plenty more life out of this shoe. So those are my thoughts on the Hoka Clifton 7 after 100 miles. It started out as a pretty good shoe, and it ended up as a great shoe, one that I really enjoyed running in this year. If you have any questions about the Hoka Clifton 7, leave them in the comments down below. I'd love to keep the conversation going down there. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of the video. Hopefully you guys are being safe out there on your runs, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?